In our previous video, we saw the basic layout and the workspace for InDesign. Now, we're going to start creating a new document, and in this one, we're going to be actually creating text fields and importing images in order to create a layout. So as I said before, and as I have said in class, InDesign is very similar to the way the workflow in InDesign is very similar to the way the workflow is in Illustrator. So if you work with Illustrator, you should be familiar with at least 90% of the tools inside InDesign. InDesign, like Adobe Animate, is one of those programs where things start coalescing, where things start getting together, coming together to create a product. In this case, an EPUB or an interactive publication. Or in Adobe Animate, an actual application that you can modify via code. Now, for this particular instance, what I want to do is I want to create a new document, and I want to use the same format as what I used before, which was the iPad. So I'm going to use the iPad, and by default, it tells me under the recent selections that I've had, it brings me to the iPad. If I don't have that there, I can always enter my own values or go into mobile and choose from View All Presets, iPad. So I can choose that. I want to keep it as vertical, but I mean horizontal this time, but I don't want to use the primary text as I did in the previous video. So I'm going to turn that off, and everything else will remain as I had it on the previous video. So I'll go ahead and click Create on this, and that gives me the page, the actual template that I want to work from. So in this case, what I want to do, notice that if I select my arrow tool and I click here, I click in this area, I have nothing selected. Now, keep in mind that the white area that you see is your live area. This is what we would call the stage in Adobe Animate, or the composition window in Adobe After Effects, or the canvas in Photoshop. Everything outside that live area is the pasteboard. So anything that you place out here will not be part of the actual final product. It will not be visible. So what I want to do at this point is create a text field. Now, to create a text field is fairly straightforward. Just like in Illustrator, you would use your text tool. Now let's go and take a look at the tools here for just a second, and you'll notice that you have pretty much a lot of the tools that you use in other programs are present in this tool. Tools such as the selection tool, the direct selection tool, text tool, line tool, pen tool, and so on. You also have other tools that you probably have never seen, such as the page tool and the gap tool and things that content collector. These are tools that are specific for the workflow inside InDesign, and we will be talking about some of those as we progress throughout the class. You also have the ability to choose color themes. That is something that is now available in Illustrator. Don't know if you guys have worked with it, and that is under the eyedropper tool. So the tools are different. This one allows you to select a series of colors based on a theme of colors that you have pre-selected or pre-created or coming from an image. And the eyedropper tool works the exact same way as with any other eyedropper in any of the other programs. So let me switch that for now to the eyedropper tool and keep it like that. Now, to create a text field, it's fairly simple. All you got to do is select the text tool, and you'll notice that selecting the text tool, let me open up the properties window here so that it's available once I create the text field. So what I want to do is I want to create a text field where I want to place a title, let's say. And I want the title to be right at the top, right inside my margins. So to do that, what I want to do is I want to click and drag with that tool selected. When I click and drag, I am defining the size of the text field that I want to create. So if I want the text field to take half my page, that is how big it's going to go. It's going to be. If I want it just to be the top portion of it, then that should be sufficient. You will notice that if I move slowly, I get smart guides, which allow me to align things properly within my layout. If I'm approaching the middle of the page, you see that purple line that appears. That's a smart guide line. Let me go to the center, horizontally speaking, and you'll see that there's also a smart guide there. So I can easily align things to the middle of the page or to different areas within my layout. So let's say this is where I want the text to go. Now you notice that I just simply let go of the mouse and the text field has been created and my cursor is blinking inside that text field. Notice also that my properties have changed that basically now are based on the context of what I'm working on, which is a text field. So it allows me to choose things such as the sizing, the actual font or typeface that I'm working with, the alignment of the paragraphs, the spacing of the lines, and all that other stuff. So let's say, for example, I want to create something called Title 1. Title 1. By default, this will use whatever default font is in your computer. In my case, it's Medium Pro. But you can change by simply highlighting the text by clicking and dragging across it so that you select it just like in any other program. And then you can choose from the drop-down menu to choose any of the fonts that are available to you within your computer. Now, changing these fonts changes them inside the layout and in the environment that you're working on. But when you export, you need to make sure that these are exported with the document, or that everything's flattened, so that way you don't lose the actual look and feel of the text that you have chosen. If you need to maintain text as live text, that is as actual text on the document that you're exporting, then my suggestion is that you choose a font that is available across all platforms. Things such as Helvetica, Arial, Verdana. These are fonts that are in any device out in the market. Times New Roman, things like that. That's why Myriad Pro is one of the ones that is selected. Myriad and Myriad Pro is available in all platforms. So that's what, as I mentioned earlier in the semester, as you progress in your design career, you will notice that you have, even though you have a universe of fonts, you have very limited access to them in other devices. So while you want to design something that looks really nice on your computer, it might completely fall apart in another computer if that person doesn't have that font. So something to keep in mind. Now, let me go ahead and just simply select any typeface. Right now, I'm just going to use Avenir, for example. So if I choose Avenir right here, from this area, I'm going to choose Avenir LT, let's say heavy. You will notice that it's a very tiny little text. I can change the sizing of it here by choosing a specific size. I can actually go with the arrows point by point until I see what I like. And I can also choose the specific font within that typeface. If I want to use, let's say, Roman, I want to change it, you have the ability. So basically, this behaves the exact same way as any text field in any other program. Where there's slight differences is that you have a lot more control in InDesign, because remember, InDesign is a layout program. Therefore, all of the things that you can do with text are available within this program and more. Meaning you can actually change things such as the leading, the kerning, the actual format of the text based on whether you want to create paragraph or character styles, which are available to you. I mean, there's plenty of things that you can do to this thing in terms of the actual layout, in terms of think as if you were going for print. So you have that ability, you have that flexibility, keeping in mind that what you're creating will be actually going out for interactive media. So, and it will all be retained when you go to the interactive environment. So that's where the flexibility of using this platform for interactive media comes in, that you have the ability to design as you go and actually think as a designer before you actually start adding interactivity into this. So let's say, for example, I want to, that's the title area, and I don't want to use any more space. Then I can go ahead and use my handles on my text boxes to resize accordingly. Now, if I want to resize and I want to resize the actual title or the actual text in the box, then you can always click on one of the handles, keep it clicked until it turns white, as you just saw a second ago on the cursor, and then you start moving. Now, you'll notice that when you do that, basically, let me actually keep it clicked, and wait till it actually resizes. And this is actually resizing in all directions because I'm pressing the Alt key on my keyboard, or the Command key on the Mac. Now, if I want to resize the text like this, as I am resizing the actual text, the actual box, I need to press the Control and Shift keys on my keyboard. Then click on the handle at the corner and wait till it turns white like it just did. It just blinked. And then when you start dragging, the box will resize the content according to how you're resizing the box. Once again, the steps. If I press the Alt key or the Command key on the Mac, and I click and press and drag, it's going to be resizing equally in all directions. But if I want to resize the text box and resize the text inside it at the same time, and this applies to anything, by the way, to any box, any container, I will use Control and Shift keys pressed at the same time, then click on the handle, wait till it blinks white like it just did a second ago, and then click and drag to resize accordingly. Now, Control Z undoes what I just did, which is basically the step I just did. Now, keep that in mind, because one thing that you need to know is that anything that you create in InDesign, it resides within a container. What does that mean? Well, you are actually creating placeholders. You're creating these windows that will contain text or images or anything that you're importing into the program. The images will reside outside of the actual file until you export the EPUB. Until that point, everything is separate. The InDesign document is separate from your actual images. The InDesign document is separate from your audio files or from your video files. Whatever you have imported resides elsewhere. It's not native to the program. The only thing that is native to the program is if you create shapes with the shape tools that you have under the tools box, or any text that you input into the program. Those two things remain inside the program. But everything else, images and all else, it's not inside the program unless you paste it into the program. And for that, you need to do, it's a different workflow. But for the most part, all of the images, and it's basically the default. Think of it as the default. Any images, sound or video that you bring into InDesign will reside elsewhere until you actually export the EPUB or the interactive PDF that you're creating. Now, with this in mind, let me go ahead and create another text box, and I'm going to click and drag. In this case, I'm going to click and drag a box that's about Y size, and then I want to put placeholder text on this. To put placeholder text inside that text box, I am going to go under Type, and at the very bottom of Type, there's something that says Fill with Placeholder Text. This is what we call lipsum or lorem. So basically, this is just made up words that are meant to look like an actual language, but they're not. And you'll notice that it filled the entire box. Now, let's say, ooh, this box is too big, I need it to be smaller. When I do that, notice that when I resize the box, some of the text disappears. And I automatically get this little red box on the lower right-hand corner of my text box. That indicates to me that there is what we call overset text. Overset text is text that is hidden. It is still inside, it's still there, text still there, it's just hidden from view because I have less space for the text to be seen because I have resized my text box to a size that will not let me see that text. So it's overset. When you go to print this or when you go to export this, the program will tell you, hey, you have overset text in specific areas. Now, how do you address that? There are many workflows to address having overset text. The first one, which it might be the first one that most of you will think of, is, well, let's resize that text. But as you can see, this is fairly small. As is right now, I am looking at this, if I were to export this to an iPad, that will be almost illegible. So that tells me that this text actually needs to be bigger. So if I want to select all that text, I'll just double click in any of the words, then press Control A or Command A on the Mac, and then I'm going to increase the viewing size of that to about 18 point. That is more of a base size for applications. 18 point is a good size to start from. If you go below that, you might have legibility issues depending on the typeface that you choose. Notice that now I have even less visible text in my text box. If I stretch that box, I have a lot of overset text. So let's say, for example, I have that text and this is telling me, the text field is telling me you have overset text. How do I fix that? Like I said, you can reduce the size if you want to, not advisable. Another way is to reflow the text from that box onto another box. And to do that, you can create a new text box if you want to. So let me do that first. Let me create a new text box here and place it, let's say, about this size right here. Notice that that is blinking, that I have the cursor there. So I'm going to use my arrow tool. Now the text box is selected. If I click on that little red box on the previous box right here, the overset text aid, you'll notice that my text is attached to my cursor. The overset text, whatever happened after that point, is attached to my cursor. And if I click anywhere on this box, that text will be flowing from this box onto this box. So the overset text is now appearing on this box. So that means these two boxes are connected. Okay? You will notice that you have this little icon here that says some text is coming in from somewhere. That little blue arrow, that indicates that there's text coming in from somewhere, which is this box here. If I resize this box, let's say, the text will get pushed into that box now. If I resize it to be bigger, the text will be pulling from whatever happened to be overset on that text box. So you have flexibility as to how the text flows on your designs. Now, another way to create text boxes is not just by clicking on the text box. You can actually create any shape with any of the drawing tools. You could use a rectangle, you could use a circle, let's say, for example, so long press on any of these frame tools or the shape tools. Let's say I use the rectangle, the circle tool, and let me draw a circle here. I'm going to press Shift to constrain proportions. So I have defined a circle. Now, when I go back and I click with my arrow tool on the red box right here to select it and make sure that the text is attached to my cursor, if I click inside that circle is no longer a shape. It now becomes a text box with the shape of the circle. So you notice that you actually can create any shape or any form or basically any drawing can potentially become a text box. This is not new to this program. This is something, if you didn't know, you could do this in Illustrator as well. The difference here is the flexibility of how the text flows. And notice that I still have more overset text, so I can keep on going and creating new boxes. Now, the other way to create text boxes is by simply selecting that overset warning right here, clicking, making sure that my cursor, my mouse actually is holding the text, and then clicking and dragging. Notice that I didn't have any tool selected at this point. I was literally on the selection tool. So if I click and drag, I have defined a text area for the text that is now the text box with the rest of the text. Now, this tells me you still have more text, more overset text, but I run out of space on this page. So if this was the case, what would I do? Well, like I showed you on the previous video, you can always go back and create a new page by dragging one of the masters onto your document. And then if you click on that warning plus and then click on the margin on the next page, you will notice that you've defined a text box that fits the entirety of that page. You'll notice that the text box goes all the way to down here. So clicking on the margin with text attached to your cursor will automatically define. If you click on the margin anywhere, it will create a text box that fits the entirety of your page. In that case, almost like a primary text box. You'll notice that they are all connected. When I resize this document, let's bring the bottom portion of that text box up. You'll notice that the text below gets pushed down because the overflow from that particular text box gets pushed onto that other box on the next page. So these two text boxes, even though they reside in different pages, are connected. And so the flow of text starts from the first box, then it goes to this one, then it goes to this one, then it goes to that one, and finally to the one on the next page. This is how you create text boxes and how you connect them. So fairly straightforward process, but it's one that gives you a lot of flexibility because, as you saw by me creating a circle in this case, I can basically define any shape and turn it into a text box. So I can have text that actually hugs a specific shape. So if I have an image and I want to surround it with text, I can easily create that by creating with the pen tool a shape that goes exactly in the area that I want to be around a specific area. So say, for example, if I wanted text to be around the circle, I could create a shape that curves around this area, and then this area would be my text area. Text will be on this side, covering the or surrounding the circle and maintaining that shape to enhance the way things look. Now, if I want to see what this looks like when it's printed or when it goes to being output, you press the W key on the keyboard. If you press the W key, you are previewing how this will be output. And so you stop seeing those guides and those handles and everything else. The W key shows you the preview of how this is going to look when you send it to a device. To go back to working mode, press W again on the keyboard, and you will go back to seeing everything in working, not on preview mode, but an actual working mode. And so you have the ability to go back and click on the handles. Now, let's say, for example, if I press W and I'm seeing it like this, I can combine both workflows. I can easily select any of the boxes and I see only the handles for whatever I have selected. So if I click on this and I resize it, you'll notice that everything got moved and this got pushed down because I reduced the amount of text area that I had for that original text. So it's showing me everything interactively, even though I am on preview mode. But if I want to see the handles, I want to press the W key again so that I actually see everything and the outlines for everything that I'm working with. Now, let's say I want to increase the overall spacing between the different lines. Let's say my text seems a bit busy. I want to create more space in between the lines. Well, for that, you will select one of the, double click on one of the text boxes. So you select the text itself. And if you press Control A or Command A on the Mac, you'll notice that all text boxes get selected, all of the text gets selected. And if I go to Properties, I can change the leading just like you would in any other program. Now, as you know, leading is the spacing between the lines of text, meaning the space between the different baselines of your text line. So the imaginary line in which all text resides. So there's an imaginary line. Let me deselect that. And you probably see that all text seems to be resting on an imaginary line. That's what we call the baseline of the lines of text. The spacing between that baseline and the next baseline is what we call the leading. And the leading is, it's actually called leading because they used to use little pieces of lead, little rectangles of lead to space out the different lines. So if you want to increase the leading, all you got to do is just select the entirety of the text and then choose from that drop-down menu to increase or decrease in order to give more or less leading to your visuals. So in my case, let's say, for example, I want this to be at 30. I'll go to 30 here, or I can choose from the drop-down menu. And then if I deselect, you'll notice that my text is a lot more spaced out, given a lot more legibility when it comes to working with interactive media. So if this was going to be an app, that would be a nice thing to do to actually give more space for the viewer to actually be able to see what you intend for them to see. You will also notice that when I double click on the text and I select the text, either I select all or I click and drag across a piece of text, I am given the ability to choose colors, strokes for that text specifically. I'm also given the ability to create whether I want bullets or whether I want numbering without actually having to create a style sheet. But if I want to create a style sheet, which is something we're going to do in the next video, then you would have to actually define the settings for the style sheet, which is not as difficult as it sounds. Very similar to the way you define style sheets in HTML, the difference being that here you don't have to actually code anything. You simply define the text the way you want it to look, and then you tell the program, I want this to be the style sheet, and it will remember for you what settings you have set up for it. You have the ability, like I said, to change the color of the fill. So if you want to change the color of that fill, is from that fill swatch up here, and then you can either choose from the default swatches that come with the program. You will notice that you're working, as I said before, on the RGB spectrum. So you're working with direct-to-screen colors or primary colors for screen. You also have the ability to switch to your color palette, so you can choose actual colors, or you can choose gradients if you want to apply gradients. So from that, you can create. You can either choose a preset color, or if you have a predefined color, you can always create a new color. So if you click on New Swatch, it will give you a swatch here that you can always double click, and then opens up the swatches option. And then here you can change whether you want this by color if you have numbering for the color itself. Notice that the colors give you a warning if you're choosing a color that is out of range or gamut within devices. So if you click on that, that should correct that for you. You also have the ability to choose from any of the library of colors that are available to you for print. So things such as Pantone colors and such are available to you. You can also switch to CMYK. I don't see why you would do that, but you have that ability. And remember, this is available to you here because the program is a print media program. The program is originally intended for print media, but more and more people, because the workflow is now pushing towards interactive media, either via EPUB or web, the companies don't want to have to retrain everybody within the company, the designers. So they actually are changing the workflow to include all these interactive workflows that allow designers to simply work as if they were working for print, but exporting for interactive media on devices. So you have flexibility as to create the new colors, and you have the ability to rename the color to whatever you want. So let's say, for example, if I want to choose this color and I'm going to call it powder blue. Powder, let's see, light blue. I'm just going to call it light blue. So I want to call this light blue, and I can choose whether I want it to be a spot color or process. It doesn't really matter for our workflow because this is all print stuff. So I'll explain what spot and process is in just a second. Now I can go ahead, or I can give the color based on the settings that I have selected here. So it will tell me red 91, green 203, and blue 245 if I select this. You'll notice that it will rename it based on those values. So a lot of people choose to do that. You also have a hexadecimal number here that you can keep in mind in case you're trying to match this to something that's going to go on the web. So if I click OK on this, you will notice that it is available now under my colors, and it will apply it to whatever I have selected. So if I deselect by selecting my black arrow tool, you'll notice that the text now contains that color. Let's say, for example, I want to change its value, it's the size of that to say 48, or a little bit less, probably 36, so that it becomes a title. And so I am basically defining what the look and feel of my text is going to be. Let's assume for a second that I need to have that defined. I change the color and I change the sizing of it. If I want that to be a style sheet, all I got to do is click here under my properties for the text field and say I want to create a new paragraph style, making sure that I'm inside paragraph styles. You will notice that I have nothing here. But if I want to create a new one, all I got to do is just click on that plus sign right here. Now, when I do that, it's going to open up the window and it's going to tell me, what do you want to call this? And I'm going to call this title, because that is the style that I've defined. This is going to be for titles, or titles, if I want to define it like that. Then I hit return, and that becomes my title's style. It retains all of the different changes that I made to that text and anything that I would have made here. So if I had aligned it to the center, if I had changed the leading for it, if I had changed the spacing between the kerning, let's say, for example, if I wanted to define a different kerning for that. And remember, kerning is the space between two characters, and tracking is the space amongst all characters. So if I wanted to change that for that specific style, then it will allow me to save it in there. And then if I want to apply it to something else, let's say, for example, I want to apply it to this line of text here. All I have to do is just select it, go to the drop-down menu and select that style, and you will notice that it gets applied to that particular text. So it gives me a lot of flexibility, because now I can control this text and this text from the exact same area. So if I go now and I say, well, I don't want that blue to be the color. I want that to be a different color. Well, for all titles across my document, I can always go ahead and say, okay, I want to edit that title. So if I click on that title drop down and I click on the little pencil to edit, it should open up an edit window for me that allows me to then select the typeface. So say, for example, I want to change my typeface from minion to something else. Well, I want to click preview here to see what that looks like on my document. So I click preview, and then I'll go to the drop down menu, and let's say, for example, I want to change this from that to Avenir. There it is. That's the change. And I want it to be, let's say, I don't want it to be blue, so I'll go to character color, and I want to change it to, say, red. Now I know what it looks like. And you notice that making these changes is changing all of the titles in my document. So having that style sheet helps me quite a lot to work all of the different titles all of the different pieces of text that are controlled by that specific style sheet. Notice underneath this that you have a lot of other things a lot of them can be used for interactive media, but all of them are based on print media. So anything that has to do with layout would be covered by all of these things such as paragraph rules and borders, kerning. I mean, there's like grep styles. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can work with. The ones that are concerning to us from the interactive perspective, because of our type of design, what we're working with is the basic general characteristics of the actual style that we're working with. Advanced, so that we can work with horizontal scaling and vertical scaling, indenting. Those are the ones that work for us the most. Then bullets and numbering, and character color. And we're going to see those in more detail in the next video.